Alrighty, wanted to get back on here and do something really quickly. I guess this will be, just for continuity's sake, for my sake, I'm going to call this Pod 47, and essentially I'm going to try to make a video here where I'm going to stitch together a few different pieces of video and photo footage that I think is interesting given the sort of discussions that happen these days, especially on the internet, with respect to the umpires in baseball and the calling of balls and strikes. These videos people will essentially make these days where they'll show a video of a pitch that essentially lands in the catcher's glove like a clear inch or inch plus off the strike zone, and then people making these videos are sort of they're losing their minds about this umpire made this mistake, that mistake, the other, and then here what I want to do is just do a little bit of video based analysis and kind of break down the sort of the things that you might see in the course of these sorts of discussions, and why I think that these discussions are somewhat problematic. So I'm just going to start off with the video that directly precipitated this, and I'm not sharing my screen, so I'm going to have to edit this in, but actually, here we go. Let's go to this first video. This is a video, so the caption on this video is "Atrocious Strike 3 call on Mookie Betts," and we're just going to kind of let this roll as many times as we need. So second time through, you see the pitch. It's clearly a breaking ball that breaks off the plate and slightly down. And so as you can see, when the catcher caught the ball, that little circle diagram that's below the strike zone by an inch and off to the, it's off the plate. But I think, if you take a closer look at this video, you're going to notice that this is an atrocious strike call. I don't really think that's accurate, and I think we need to have a bit of a discussion, essentially, when we're talking about this, about the framing of pitches and the ways that the catchers are almost, it is deliberate. They're deliberately obfuscating the image of what is going on by essentially doing these framing of pitches where they will essentially whip the glove out to all different parts of the plate and make the pitch look worse than if they were going to set up and catch it, the way it was traditionally done. And I think part of it, you can see it in this first Mookie Betts call, is just the fact that the catcher, and we'll see this in the other video as well, they're employing this new stance technique, I guess, in order to lessen the tension on catchers' knees, that catchers will essentially go into a stance where one knee is bent and then the other knee is upright, and therefore you're not in the traditional squatting position. But the direct result of that, arguably, is that you really don't frame the pitches quite as properly because your glove is not in position to make the catch at the point where the ball truly crosses the plate. And again, this is part of the nuance of catchers in MLB when they are framing pitches, and obviously the intent of framing pitches to some extent is to trick the umpires. That's just a fact. But also, I just think when you watch a lot of these videos, you see a picture that is more complicated than just atrocious strike 3 call on Mookie Betts. How about we reframe this video as, debatable strike 3 call on Mookie Betts. But again, could do a breakdown of this later. So we're going to move on to this video, and shout out to Jake Savicki. I see his videos on social media, ball or strike or cranked, whatever it is. Good videos, good content. But so he made a video of Jen Pawol, first female umpire in MLB history, gets her first game behind home plate, and then this first pitch, the catcher sets up. The pitch is arguably low and in, and she calls it a strike. It's not low and in, actually. It's right down the middle, but in. So, 93 mile an hour fastball, and she calls it a strike. And so, as you watch it, I think one of the things that's sort of interesting about the camera angle, a lot of these pitches, and we're going to flip back to the Mookie Betts angle to show how it's even more so the case. You look at the Mookie Betts strike 3 call, and one of the things you notice is that, seeing as that's a right-handed pitcher, the shot of the pitcher to the catcher is being shot from center field off line to the right, meaning they're shooting over the right shoulder of the pitcher. Consequently, the camera shot that you're seeing in that purported rectangle labeled on the screen is actually it's a visually illusory, because the straight lines that they're drawing make no sense in terms of the diagonal lines that you can literally see on the ground. So my basic point here and thesis is that for people to be freaking out about the box, it leads me to think that in the era of the ABS strike zone and whatnot, we're really not going to resolve the issues of whether something was or not a strike. It's just going to give people a chance to argue. So I did this, so we're going to roll through these, and there's about 6:48 into the thing, just as a marker for myself, but to get the photographs going. So if we look at this from a photograph perspective, obviously what I want to do here is really break this video down piece by piece to try and convince you this is not the worst call of all time. So here's a picture in their they're either, well, let's watch the whole video. Okay, so they're pitching out of the stretch. My photos don't pick up before he picks his leg up. So pitching out of the stretch with nobody on base. And as you can see from this photograph, the catcher is set up initially. Again, they're on a one knee down, one knee up sort of stance to relieve knee tension, all these sorts of things. And when you look at where the glove is set up initially, he's calling for a high and inside strike. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to even get into the fact that the strike zone's supposed to go with the friggin' letters and never does. We're just going to worry about the strike zone as conventionally understood. And what you would say from this first photograph is that the catcher is set up for a high and inside strike. And why this is important is one of the things that umpires judge is not only where the pitch goes, but also if the catcher essentially expected the pitch to go there and then it goes there. If that happens, the pitch is well executed, and you basically get banana points for that. In other words, you might get a borderline strike call. So for a pitch that is supposed to be up and in, and then will end up being middle in, off the plate by about an inch, clearly that's not the worst executed pitch. But as we roll through these photographs, we're going to honestly see a frankly bizarre story start to emerge of what the catcher did here and why it exaggerates, I think, the impact of the from the diagram, not only the strike zone. So in this case, in this video, and this is a Braves versus Marlins game, whoever the hell is playing, but obviously it's the Braves pitching. And one thing you notice is this shot is much more so of a direct, almost 180 degree shot from center field to home plate, but obviously is not a straight shot. And the reason you don't do a straight shot is it just looks bad from camera perspective, so you're always going to be off center. So again, you just have to take into account when you're looking at these things that the diagram on the screen should not be the end-all be-all, because it's not as precise as it makes itself look with the nice clean lines and yada yada. It's literally superimposed onto a video. So that's the first photograph, and then we have the second photograph. Now, from the first photograph, the pitcher's in the stretch, and the front leg is up, meaning he's on his way to putting it down, driving towards home plate. By the second image, we've got the leg going towards the ground now, and the hand has begun to separate from the glove. And another thing you can tell is that the catcher has now relocated from the top inside of the zone to the bottom part of the inside of the zone. So one comment here is you could say, well, this pitch is kind of intended just to be an inside pitch, whether high, low, whatever, just kind of get one over. But anyway, it makes a difference, because from the first photo to the second, this guy has completely changed the sort of expectation where you would think his glove is going to be, and in addition, it's going to make the way he catches the ball more difficult, and it's going to make this look misleading. So now to move on to the third photograph, you can see the letters on the back of the jersey. He's delivering the pitch. The ball is almost out of the hand. It'll be out of the hand in a split second, driving forward, etc. And what do we see from the catcher? Again, I don't know if this is great mechanics. The catcher has his damn glove on the ground. What the purpose of this is, I don't know, but one thing that I think, this is just an opinion, and I'm not a major league catcher. I caught when I was young, but I can't compare anything of my experience to theirs. But I don't know if I've ever heard it taught that your glove is supposed to be on the literal ground while the ball is almost being delivered. And then you move on to the next shot that I have. So pitcher's following through, good solid follow through. And one thing you notice is that the catcher has now picked the glove up off the ground and is essentially getting ready to snag it and then move the glove further into the zone, basically back to where he originally set up. And so right from this image to the follow through image, one thing you can see is that this pitch is for some period of time on trajectory to be a strike. And that's obviously because this is baseball. He's a professional pitcher. He's supposed to make balls look like strikes, strikes look like balls, and vice versa. And then you move on to the next pitch or the next image, and you can see that the ball is now, I believe, moving through the zone. And part of the reason you can see that is that in the image prior, the ball is in front of the plate. And then on the next image, the ball is basically at the plate. And part of what I think people are not perceiving is that I believe the strike zone is relative to a vertical plane at the front of home plate. Now, maybe it's more nuanced and it's the entirety of home plate and the whole 17 inches sort of thing, and using all that room and being able to evaluate it in a more holistic manner. But if you look at this image where the ball looks like it's clearly by the hitter, he's no longer looking at the ball directly because he still has his head forward in proper hitting position. But when you look at this from this perspective, guess what that ball is doing right here and right now? It's touching the strike zone. So this idea that this was such a terrible call because, and again, we see the catcher's glove at this point is set up low and away again. And again, this pitch, maybe is caught more easily if the catcher is not doing all this. But I'm getting way too critical of him, and he's a way better baseball player than I could have ever dreamed to be. Then the ball lands in the glove here, and we can tell that the ball is about right to land in the glove, because otherwise, frankly, we've seen from the mechanics here, the fucking glove wouldn't have been there. So this kind of creates this image of, oh, look at that. There's, I can see light in between the strike zone and where the ball lands. Then to circle back again to a couple more still shots, it's more controversial than just where the ball lands in the glove. Frankly, where the ball lands in the glove, especially relative to breaking pitches, etc., tailing pitches, it's about where it crosses home plate, I'm sorry if you don't understand that, but it's not just about where the catcher catches the ball, but the nuance is that where the catcher catches the ball influences the way that they'll end up framing the pitch. And so, again, what you see is that the catcher, we're going to flip through these last few photographs, but he does this thing where he brings the ball back all the way up to the high and inside zone where he had set up initially. So, again, not to be critical of the catcher, but this is part of the reason why it looks so strange, is he sets up there, he moves down to the ground, he picks himself back up, and then he gets back to the middle, catches the ball, and then he brings it up back into the zone to sell it a little bit. But again, if you look at some of the still images where the ball is clearly past the hitter, thinking of this particular image, I'm just going to visually mark it, where everybody's looking at the ball basically except for the hitter at this point, and he's got, this is maybe TM, but he kind of have his ass out, and he's got, he's obviously not taking a swing. He's clearly about to look at the ball to figure out whether it landed sort of as a strike. And so then again, just going through a slow motion video, again, boom, that's where you can say, like, it was a strike. And clearly, as you can see as well, it's a 93-mile-an-hour pitch. Just because it lands like half a foot later in a certain position doesn't mean that's where it's crossing the plate. And people don't seem to understand this. And again, from my slow motion video, you can just see that there's little more reason why this was called a strike than, Jen Pawol has bad eyes. And I'm not saying this is what Jake Savicki is saying at all, because, again, this is his format. He just, he sees something and then he puts his 2 cents onto it, and that's all well and good. But, again, I'm just going to make the argument that this is not as egregious as the indication would be from looking at the catcher and looking where the catcher ended up. And so again, to go back to the Mookie Betts pitch as well, and you see again, the catcher is set up on the ground for some reason, arguably because he's throwing a low and away breaking pitch. But again, I just challenge you to actually slow these videos down and try to evaluate visually with your eyes. Unfortunately, I have really good eyesight, so I sort of pick up and judge, where these things cross and have a decent understanding of, boom, I took a mental picture and that's where the strike is. But these things are a little more controversial than just the ABS system. Get the robots out here. Like, frankly, you have to program the robots properly in order for them to do the job. And obviously, again, we're talking about framing of pitches, and you have a catcher who goes from glove on ground to glove in bottom away part of the zone to glove slightly below that to glove mysteriously ends up in the middle of the damn zone. And obviously that's a little bit silly. Somebody needs to, I don't know how they could legislate this, but it's a thing where the catchers have gotten so damn good at this, but it's also so stylized that it's on the one hand making pitches either look bad, it's either making pitchers miss pitches that they should be getting, or it's confusing fans in general. And so I wanted to kind of quickly go through that, because I just think there's a sort of broader discussion that has to be done, and this sort of reflects my philosophy background. But you really want to break down arguments into logical components and try and have arguments on the basis of principles. You don't want to make shit up. And so one of the things you want to look at when you're looking at these videos of ball and strike calls, whatever it is, when you're looking at these videos, always keep in mind that that basically the visual the visual image that you're going to see is misleading, and that's for a reason. The ball is going 90 plus miles an hour usually. There's a great break on the ball. There's all these different things, and so you always want to maybe be careful in your analysis and always take a second look, like look twice at everything before. And again, I'm not picking on anybody in general, if it's Jake Savicki or anybody else reacting to this, but I understand why on television that looks worse than it does. But this has been something that's been sticking in my craw and bothering me for some time, is just the fact that in my opinion, these analyses are not being done properly, because we need to have a proper debate about what the strike zone is in baseball. And I think that boils down to a couple of things. Number one, in my opinion, the strike zone needs to get higher. What does that mean? It means that ideally the strike zone is supposed to be between the letters and the knees. So let's follow the letter of the law. And especially in this TV broadcasts, what you're essentially going to have to do with this little funky white rectangle that's superimposed onto the screen is the strike zone, which is the whole purpose for why you would shoot the image from center field, as opposed to what I think it should be done is should be shot from either the first or third baseline, depending on who the hitter is. So in this case, it's a right-hander, so you want to shoot from the first baseline. That's just my idea, because I don't really prioritize seeing the strike zone this way, but I understand why it is one of the visual focal points that you would want to focus on from a broadcast perspective. And that being the case, I just think that this diagram essentially needs to be drawn bigger for most people, because it's not really reflecting the fact that, at best what it reflects is the position of the letters relative to when the hitter gets into launch position, when they're fully tensed up, and therefore when they're crouched over a little bit and their letters all of a sudden do go a little bit lower. But again, I think there's an issue. This is just my opinion, that essentially, we need to have a strike zone that goes all the way up to the top of the strike zone. And I'm going to stop ranting about that, because that's just me going out on a limb there. That's extra business. But the main point of view is that when we're watching on the broadcasts and we think that we see it all, you always have to be a little careful that reality is often very tricky in terms of watching it correctly judging it, and all these sorts of things. And so when it comes to these matters, I think the fundamental set of questions that needs to be asked by people is, are you judging the strike call in terms of whether you think it was made correctly on the basis of where the catcher catches the ball? Because, spoiler alert, that doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? If the catcher was located, 5 feet back of where they're normally located, and they still caught the ball, obviously there's physics problems associated with this thought experiment, but, the catcher is there to make sure that the ball doesn't go past them, and to catch the ball cleanly on strike, so that if it's a foul ball hit into the glove, it's a strike, etc. And so, from the catcher's perspective, they probably would tell you that, of course it's not a strike where I friggin' catch it. Otherwise, why am I doing all this friggin' nonsense with framing? And so, clearly it's not about where the ball gets caught. It's about where the ball crosses the plate. And like I said, that then fundamentally speaking, the debate would essentially, it would revolve around this thought experiment, which would be, you have, let's say you have an ephus pitch, thrown well enough that the ball goes high enough in the air and comes down such that it literally lands on the plate, then you have a little bit of a paradox there where technically the ball has been released by the pitcher, and then in the course of crossing the plate, it was both a ball and a strike because it went from being a ball out of the zone to being a strike in the zone to then falling out of the zone and being a ball. Now, I guess the answer to this hypothetical, trying to make it real, is, well, the ephus pitch, supposing it actually landed on home plate, it would be a ball for the same reason that that a ball landing on, that a pitch thrown low in the dirt that lands on home plate would be a ball, because the plate is not in the strike zone, it's not above the knees, and therefore it would essentially be about where the ball ended up relative to its journey through the plate. So if it lands on the plate, again, this is though saying like, oh, it landed kind of on the front of the plate, because the other hypothetical would be an ephus pitch that crosses through the strike zone at a certain point is a strike, and then later, after it passes the plate, at that point it bounces or whatever. So there are some examples that complicate the picture of, straight up logic and unchallenged ideas that I'm trying to put forward here. But what my basic point is that, we want to think about these things in a logical manner, and most of the pitches that we're talking about are fastballs and breaking balls. So, that's sort of the main two types of pitches that exist in baseball, but stay with me here for a second. For the fastballs, you're not really going to have this sort of ephus pitch scenario. You really are going to have a situation where, based on the velocity, usually that pitch is going to cross the plate, and it will be a strike from the moment it crosses the plate to the moment it lands in the glove, because the distance isn't very, very large. But again, I just think based on these videos we've seen, there are clearly pitches where it's going to essentially touch the strike zone, i.e. it is a strike, and then based on where the pitch lands in the catcher's mitt, again, about a foot back or so, that means that, again, this is sort of the main point of this video. This pitch that Jen Pawol called, I'm pretty sure she called this one right. And if we want to say, oh, well, you kind of got to, look at it sort of funny, and then you see it was actually slightly off the plate by the time it crossed the plate, then we get to another aspect of it where this is sports. It's meant to be fun. It's meant for entertainment purposes, and so if we're spending all of our time fighting and debating over the smallest of things, then, are we spending time effectively, efficiently, etc. Oh, Trump just extends the China trade tariff to Thailand for 90 days. Who could have seen that coming? Interrupting my baseball. Son of a bitch. But anyway, again, I want to reemphasize this for like the 14th time. This isn't me ripping on anybody for having an opinion, etc. I think having opinions is good, and especially from a guy like Jake Savicki, I'd honestly be interested to get his perspective in terms of getting a real definition on the strike zone, what it means, how the rules are meant to be interpreted, whether it's the entirety of the plate that's in question, whether it's the vertical plane at the front of the plate, the plane point at which the ball crosses the sort of line that divides in front of the plate from behind the plate, all these sorts of things are sort of nuances that I think reasonable people could debate about and likely debate and disagree about. So that was the video I wanted to put together, and this is essentially going to be much more of a visual video than most of my podcasts. Thank goodness. I guess a lot of them are pretty fucking boring, but this one will likely include a lot of slow motion video, just playing over and over again of this pitch, and so probably also going to have to make a version of this video where I scratch out Jake Savicki's sort of thing so they don't think I'm trying to steal his content, because I just took it from him because it was a video of the pitch, and so this again is not meant to this is not ragging on anybody. This is just me expressing my opinion that essentially, and I guess I am a little bit of a contrarian on some of these things, but it's like, if you look at it carefully, it actually was a pretty good call, in my opinion, based on what we know, and especially when you look at it in slow motion. So that's it, and I got other stuff to do, so I'm going to keep going. Thanks.